Angel Island Tour is actually a mod I planned to review a long time ago, probably going back a year and a half at least, but I was unable to due to catastrophically bad lag and freezing from the second half of the second level, making the game practically unplayable. Now, with a much beefier PC instead of my office laptop, I can play the level pack at something even approaching a functional frame rate, and it even seems to have had a chunky amount of bonus content added after what was originally the end of the pack, even if it does derail the original point of the mod to some extent. But without further ado, let's dive in. Like most of Rogerrogerroger's level packs, most of Angel Island Tour is built to be significantly more linear than the standard SRB2 level, with it almost feeling like a long, colourful corridor on some levels that only occasionally opens up a little. Especially in the original 3 levels of the pack, you really can only take one route, and even if it does occasionally allow you to take a different path through a more open area, or take a quick shortcut down some side path, you'll never approach anything remotely close to the number and variety of routes the base SRB2 boasts. Some people might have a problem with this, but honestly, I kind of like the change in design philosophy. The good thing about the level pack being so linear is that you can very quickly figure out little techniques that allow you to save seconds off your time, and it does to an extent force you to get good, as you can't just find a way around an obstacle you find difficult. Obviously, this can be frustrating when you are low on lives, especially because the levels tend to be much longer than a vanilla level and can be fairly unforgiving with checkpoints, meaning you can spend minutes repeating the same section of level. But there's a reason Rogerrogerroger's levels are so often used as speedrun training by more experienced players. They can be great places to build up a sense of flow and momentum. This works both for and against Angel Island Tour. When you're in the zone, it can feel great reacting quickly to oncoming obstacles, quickly darting around enemies and hazards that are more of a reaction test than a test of your platforming ability. At the same time, it makes it all the more frustrating when your flow is broken for whatever reason. This is where the 2 main problems with Angel Island Tour comes into focus, both of which can be somewhat attributed to inexperience, but I feel I should still mention them. Firstly, is the fact that these maps have quite possibly more blue springs contained within 10 stages, nay, 3 stages, than I think I've seen in the entirety of the rest of my time playing SRB2. Blue springs are odd in that they're fairly useless in comparison to red and yellow ones, only launching you at most as far and fast as you would travel just jumping the gap they are relevant to. The only time that they are used in a way that doesn't just feel like pointlessly robbing you of autonomy is when they're used to boost you vertically, as they send you just barely higher than a normal jump would, so they can be used in platforming challenges. Of course, this then begs the question of why you would choose to make a level pack filled with platforming areas. You need the absolute smallest possible boost to overcome each jump, and not just, drop the height of each platform by a couple of centimeters. It slows these sections down to a crawl, and completely destroys the flow you may have built up, whereas in other maps the level design would likely have been built to minimise the necessity of gimmicks like these. The other problem, and this is likely one exclusive to me, are the enemies. Badniks in vanilla SRB2 are rarely a major threat, with most having minimal range that makes them mostly reflex tests or targets for Badnik bouncing. The few that do have projectile attacks are few and far between, and when they do appear, they are rarely in groups of more than 1 or 2 enemies, so as to stop you getting bombarded when speeding past. Enemies in Angel Island Tour, for some reason I can't explain, despite mostly sticking to the same patterns as vanilla ones, seem to be far more effective than vanilla ones, and I can't count the number of times my flow was ruined by a projectile from off screen or a group attacking me as I use an unnecessary blue spring to reach a platform. The greatest offenders are these gun beetles that appear as the standard enemy from Huge Crisis onwards, as they fire projectiles, which have hitboxes large enough that ensure that if you hit the beetle while the projectile is shot, you'll be hit by this cheap attack instead of destroying the enemy. Not only that, but due to the level design mostly being long corridors, there are several areas where there can be dozens of beetles firing at you at once, which becomes tediously rote to avoid after only a few occasions. This managed to ruin a convoy level for me. Convoy levels are my favourite trope in gaming. Do you know how difficult it is to ruin a convoy level for me? You don't even need to focus on the f***ing convoy. It's optimal to f***ing ignore it and run around it. So, standard enemies are the weak point of Angel Island Tour's standard level design. How do the 3 boss enemies compare? As is the case with almost every SRB2 boss, vanilla or not, Omega Metroid notwithstanding, it is a resounding meh. First up is this Eggman Tower thing. It has a decent amount of health and occasionally fires off a laser in your direction. Practically everything causes it to stop attacking, and it is horrendously inaccurate until the exact moment you stop paying attention to it, like some sort of clingy partner who can't bear to see you not be focusing on it. The first fight is easily winnable before it fires a single shot, and it can be safely ignored almost every other time it appears. Next is this Doomsday Zone robot ripoff. Same concept, but it fires 3 lasers instead of 1 and has half the amount of health. Even worse than the first, with a rotten first impression where it'll make you think the floor is damaging you while it takes a good 20 seconds for the tree to drop down far enough to be visible, and is entirely useless every other time it appears. Finally, the final boss of the pack is the gun commander himself, with a whole bevy of attacks to avoid. Most are done for so long that it becomes boring, and therefore it's best to pull out the old Sonic reliable, damage boosting until it dies. This is why Sonic needs some sort of health system in any game where combat is more than a passing afterthought. Like every other Roger Van der Weyde thing ever made, whether that be an SRB2 level or an animated sketch, Angel Island Tour is not a serious modern classic that grapples with heavy themes of responsibility and morality, but rather a loosely collected set of comedic moments that changes the direction of the story to be something completely different multiple times. To be fair, the first third of the pack makes good on the promise of being an Angel Island Tour, with it simply being you running through small snippets of most of the zones from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. After completing Angel Island 4 though, the story does not end and instead goes in a completely different direction, which, considering it takes up the majority of your time with the level pack, makes the name Angel Island Tour sort of redundant. Now, Sonic and Tails are captured by Gun and used for tests, but you quickly make your escape to find out why Gun has seemingly gone rogue. It's revealed that the group as a whole was obsessed with Pepsi, so when budget cuts forced them to try to create their own inferior soft drinks using the minerals of Angel Island, they went mad trying to match the quality of Pepsi. Cue a run through a remake of the Pepsiman opening stage to defeat the Gun Commander, which somehow causes him to return to sanity and restore Pepsi to Gun. So yeah, very little to actually do with Angel Island after the first 4 zones, which I'm sure some people will enjoy, but it sort of rubs me the wrong way. Considering that the last 6 levels are all fairly beefy, and the fact that the level pack is long enough as is, and that there's almost no transition between the Angel Island and Gun storylines, it feels like the 2 parts of Angel Island Tour could be easily separated into 2 different packs, without diminishing the quality of the second half and making the name Angel Island Tour more meaningful. You've likely all seen a Roger Van der Weyde sketch or SRB2 level already, you know, the graphical style that's said amongst all of them, and you've probably already decided whether you like it or not. I like it. You might find it distracting or graphically jarring when filled with normal SRB2 sprites for some level gimmicks. I don't need to dig too deep. The only problem I found with it is that some enemy hitboxes seem to be a little off when looking at their sprites, but that doesn't come up too often. Again, problems with enemies is generally down to their projectiles, and those are all pretty accurate. Music is pretty good, although I don't think any of it is original, and it can be pretty jarring with how it transitions between songs and levels with just a simple cut. I like the music in Huge Crisis though, so if anyone can tell me what the song is that plays in the beginning desert facility area, I'd thank you. Finally, the levels have a fair number of in-game cutscenes, and these all actually look pretty good. In comparison to the cutscenes bookmarking levels in Sonic Adventure Genesis, the other Rogerrogerroger level pack I've played, I think the snappiness of the in-game ones work to the mod's benefit, as they don't drop you out the gameplay and I think better suit the absurdity of Roger's style of humour. Looking at the level pack as a whole, I think the term I can best use to gauge my enjoyment of Angel Island Tour is that it was good. I wasn't a huge fan of some level design decisions, the bosses were generally pretty poor, and I'm not in love with the complete change in direction the story takes halfway through. Even if it is pretty funny, I think it'd be best to split the level into the original zones and the new gun ones. On the other hand, I think the level design as a whole is pretty good, and the level aesthetics are as unique, consistent and well made as usual, so I think it evens out to a fair 6 out of 10. On my original ranking system, that would be about a 7, but again, I'm trying to make my ranking system more fully utilised. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.